Mr
Speaker.
Call the Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Speaker, Labor is very pleased to support this legislation. When we observe the scale of the disaster in the Canterbury region, I think every member of this House accepts there is no room for partisan squabbling at central government level or, for that matter, at local government level. This is the time when people in New Zealand expect their legislators to work together to assist the recovery, to help people get their lives back together and to do so without unnecessary delay. I've had the opportunity over 3 days to spend some time with my Christchurch Member of Parliament colleagues looking around at the scale of the disaster. From Kaiapoi in the north and Pines Beach, where I went with Clayton Cosgrove, through to the Central Business District, St Albans, Avonside and south into Bexley. I've seen some of the scale of what this earthquake has done to the people of Christchurch. Literally tens of thousands of people affected, 2,500 homes rendered uninhabitable, and those people forced to seek alternative accommodation. Thousands more homes damaged, and much, sadly, of the heritage and the history of this beautiful city damaged and in some cases destroyed. And the human effects are no less real. To see in the shelters the people suffering from the trauma of that night, 4:30 in the morning, to see the stress, the fatigue on the faces of the people makes it very clear that we in this House need to do everything that we are capable of to help them get their lives back together just as quickly as they can. Mr Speaker, that is why we're supporting this legislation. We understand that this is not business as usual, that we need an efficient and a swift response. We welcome the Canterbury Earthquake Advisory Commission as a way of coordinating and facilitating the response to this disaster. And, sir, it makes sense that we work to assist the government in those efforts that will achieve that end. And I want to acknowledge the role of Clayton Cosgrove, who is Labor's shadow spokesperson on the recovery, who has worked hard not only in his own electorate, but worked very hard with all of my colleagues and with Jim Anderton to do everything that they can to help people on the ground. Mr Speaker, it's important that we have legislation to streamline the process, but it is equally important that in doing that we do not remove the safeguards that are necessary to maintain the standards. We don't want the cowboys, we don't want the get-rich-quick merchants that move in and exploit people in this situation. We don't want to see those that would knock over heritage buildings, not because they were not repairable, but simply because it was convenient to them to wipe out that piece of heritage that might have been protected. And we don't want to see people lose their legitimate rights that when they are affected by a regulation in an adverse manner, that they have the right to respond and to be heard and to be listened to. And it's important, Mr Speaker, to have those safeguards in place. Mr Speaker, I want to acknowledge the cooperative attitude that the Minister, Jerry Brownlee, has shown in this. It's been a good example of how the two sides of the House have been able to work together. The Minister's offer to allow Labor to see the Orders in Council in advance is much appreciated. The changes that were made from early drafts, allowing those Orders in Council to go to the Regulations Review Committee, where they can be subject to scrutiny, they can get expert advice, they can listen to the report of the Office of the Clerk. That's an important safeguard, and where something is wrong, to then be able to bring it back to the House and to expose it to debate. I think that that is very important. I welcome too the announcement by the Minister that the sunset clause that's necessary in legislation of this nature will be brought back from 2015 to 2012, because I think by and large the substantial work would have been done through that period of time, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I want to say that while we streamline the process, one thing we should be rejoicing about in this House is that despite the complaints of red tape and compliance in nanny state, we actually had in New Zealand building codes that were effective in preserving human life. That we saw not one life lost in our country when an earthquake of a similar magnitude in Haiti took the lives of 230,000 people is something that we can be proud of. So, this House on occasions has got it wrong in the 90s about building codes that led to leaky homes, but it is really important that we maintain those high standards and that level of protection, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge the work by so many people to alleviate the plight of those that have been affected by this earthquake. It's a bit hard to know where to begin, but I suppose you'd begin with the emergency services, seeing the search and rescue teams coming in from all parts of the country, seeing the work done by the police, seeing the soldiers out there at night doing the work, working alongside the police, the firefighters doing what they could to help. All of those things, sir, make you proud to be a New Zealander with people that are prepared to act in a professional and a selfless way. I want to acknowledge the role of the Mayor and Council and the officials of not only the Christchurch City Council but also Waimakariri and Selwyn. They have worked beyond expectation. I've seen the people out there down the streets working long hours doing the jobs. I've seen the Salvation Army in St John's working in the night shelters, doing that work in a way that lifts the lives of those people who they are helping. And I've seen the work of the volunteers, the students with the shovels over their shoulder, ready to muck in and help. And all of those things, sir, I think are very positive in the response. I've also seen the resilient nature of Christchurch people and the way in which they have often dealt with that adversity, being prepared to work alongside and help their neighbours first, even when their own situation is also a very difficult one. But there comes a point where the euphoria wears off and people start to feel the stress and the strain. And at that point, Mr. Speaker, it's really important that we provide the support they need and the information they need. I'm really pleased that the Earthquake Commission has started a series of meetings working alongside my colleagues. Leanne Dalzell convened a meeting, 500 people in Christchurch South with the Earthquake Commission. I think that's really important. Really important. I don't think it's helpful to have that sort of debate across the House. We're talking about something positive that's happening there, where the Earthquake Commission is there to provide advice with the geotechnical experts, with the loss adjusters. But I want to say to the Minister in a helpful manner that there are a lot of questions that our members have been getting out there that they need answers to. People who have built their homes on areas subject to liquefaction. I've seen the disaster that has caused, and those people desperately want to know whether they'll be able to rebuild. And if they can't rebuild on their sections, what the level of compensation might be for that, for their plight. I want to know why it is that the insurance companies have refused to give cover on people moving into new homes for 3 weeks. What situation does that create for people that want to sign up to their new home but know they've got to have that protection? That's something I hope that the House will be able to work with the insurance companies on to get a change of attitude. I want to know what happens to those people who are under or uninsured. I know it's easy to condemn people for not having insurance, but I spoke to somebody on an invalid's benefit that didn't have insurance because he couldn't afford it. He couldn't afford it. And obviously we can't leave those people in a situation where they are suffering and have no help. There are people out there that still don't have their sewerage connected. And, you see the portaloos down the street, but that's no way for elderly people to have to go out in the street to use that. I know the Minister and others will be working hard to get those services put back in place. And the help to those in temporary accommodation. People that I've spoken to that are living with family, living with friends, renting a motel, they can't do that longer term. Clearly that is another need for help. Mr Speaker, I know everybody, including in this House, needs to be patient, but we also need to acknowledge that people out there want and need full information, and they need